Hello there. My name is Linda Watson, and welcome to Inspire Me Equine, a season of the podcast Inspire Me Forward. I am the founder and the host of this sacred circle. Recently, it came into our hearts that equine leadership and Inspire Me Forward should collaborate. Equine Leadership is a publication of short stories sharing the voice and wisdom of the horse. It is now going into its 11th year. Inspire Me Forward, in its 3rd year, is a podcast sharing stories of life and all the pieces that hold it together, even when it might feel like it is falling apart. This moment in time seemed like the perfect evolution of the two. It felt natural to invite the horses and authors from equine leadership. In this space, they will share their own unique ways of bringing the voice and wisdom of the horse to the human world. And so, this season, we will delve into that horse-human relationship and the paradigm that is the herd in Inspire Me Equine. Equine leadership has a unique vision. We believe that horses, living as close to nature as possible, can provide a paradigm of living that is clear, authentic, and heart-based. There is much to learn that is good for all of humanity, as well as the collective that we call Earth. Spending time observing and interacting with the paradigm of the horses is a move to simplify life, to connect with something profound and enlightening. Their natural way of life offers insight into our truest paths. When we step outside of the ring and into the herd, we experience a relationship of equity and compassion. So before we begin, let us take a moment to breathe, to connect our hearts with the present moment, and invite the horses to join us in this space. And there we are in the present moment here with Stephanie Sawtelle today. Thank you for being here, Stephanie. And I feel the horses here, and I'm excited to have a conversation with you. I am so excited to be able to sit and just talk horses and whatever else comes up. Stephanie, I will give you a moment to introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Stephanie Sawtelle. I'm in Erie, Pennsylvania, and I have a small farm, actually a bit south of Erie in Edinboro, Pennsylvania. And I have a small farm with 3 horses and a lot of other animals and a bunch of awesome nature surrounding us. And I do equine assisted learning, and my work has a pretty strong spiritual and intuitive aspect to it.
Awesome. I can't wait to dig into that. Mm-hmm. So Stephanie wrote for our 10th anniversary volume last year, and your article was just so... I say article, I'm going to go back and forth between article and story, as last year we just flipped to publishing on Amazon, and they don't allow magazines which have articles, so you'll hear me say article and story, but intertwined. Your piece... I loved your piece, how it really had me nodding my head a lot, going, yes, that's what happens around the horses. So it was called How Time Works, as learned through a lifetime with my horse. And there was a quote in that that really struck close for me. And it says, time is not one thing. It does not work in only one direction or at one pace, but it is undeniably one of the great structures by which we can define, experience, and create our existence, including our connection with each other and with our horses. I'll add to that little bit. And it's so many, I love that because there's so many times when I'm out in the field with the horses and time disappears or folds in on itself. And it's just, yeah, that quote itself was just like, yes, that's exactly what happens. So thank you for that whole story. It was beautiful. I will put a link to that later on. But let's get right in here, and I'd love to hear about a memorable moment with a horse. I am sure you have millions, but is there one that just really sort of sits in your heart that really, like, oh yeah, that's the one?
So I was sort of sitting with that question more and more as we got closer to this talk, and it's so, like, as you said, so many memories came up. I don't even know, thousands of memorable moments with horses that are just filed away in my mind and in my heart. And I just kind of, at some point, I just sort of set it aside because I just couldn't make one memory come forward more than another. And I thought, well, the right one will be on my mind as I get up to the interview. And so this morning, the one that was sitting in my mind, and this is really interesting to me, and I'm sure that we'll find out why this one came forward the most, but it's actually my very first memory of a horse, which is from when I think I was about 3. I was definitely under the age of 4. And I remember we were at the farm of a cousin of my grandfather, and it was like a family picnic or a family party. And I wandered away because I saw there were 2 horses a little ways away from the party. And in hindsight now, I know they were draft horses, probably like Belgians or something. And they were tied to a piece of farm machinery. In my 3-year-old memory, I only remember seeing the horses and not really any of the context. And I went over to pet them. And at some point, shortly after I arrived over by the horses, something scared them, and they jumped up and pulled back, both of them at the same time. And in doing so, one of them hit me in the forehead with a hoof and sort of knocked me away. And being the big horses that they were, they also pulled this piece of farm machinery up and towards them. And I don't know exactly what happened after that. I don't know if they broke free from it or if they dragged it away, but they went running either with or without the machinery. And I remember, my parents taking care of the bump on my forehead, and I've thought about that moment so many times because in my 3-year-old brain, I didn't attach any fear of horses to it or anything. I just remember wanting to know where the horses went and could I go pet them again and could I go see them again, even though I had just had, I guess, what would have been a scary experience, although I don't remember the fear associated with it. So that's the memory that came up most strongly this morning was just that one.
For sure. As you say that, what came into my mind is that it felt like the horse was getting you out of the way.
Absolutely. I've had that thought a million times. And, I think I'll probably never know for sure. Well, maybe I will someday, but probably not in this lifetime. But yeah, I mean, I could have been saved from a much worse injury than a bump on the forehead. Certainly.
Interesting. Wow. And like you see, they said there's no fear associated with it.
Yeah, I love how I had such a draw to the horses that experience didn't deter me in the least as far as I am aware.
Yeah,
It's just, I was all just still horses, horses, horses. Anytime I could, see them or envision them or have I had a lot of toys that were horses when I was little. I had a huge My Little Pony collection. Yeah, and it's just amazing to me, like all the things that I feel certain about that memory, and also, like you said, the things that I don't know.
Mhm.
What actually happened, what could have happened, all the what ifs, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I just love that my 3-year-old brain didn't overthink it, and I still just loved
Love
horses. I
that.
still just wanted to be
Yeah,
next to the horses.
exactly. Interesting. And interesting how you were talking about toys, and I've had people speak of books, and it's what if we started with horses young, what was it that held us there until the time was ready later on in life, and what carried us through those young years, and that still having that connection, whether it was
Yeah,
figurines, toys, books, writing, coloring, or drawing it, whatever it was, there was something that carried us through and still kept us connected.
for sure. Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
For me, it was toys and drawing. Um, and as I got older, it shifted to include unicorns. It didn't really shift from horses to unicorns, but there was unicorns. So yeah, there was figurines in my room, and reading all the stories like Black Beauty, and you know, oh gosh, all of those amazing horse stories from when I
Yes.
was
Yep.
younger person, a young teenager. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Black Beauty, timeless, for sure.
Yes.
So this leads us into your story from then till to now. Not necessarily what you're doing now. We'll get to that, but how'd you get from there to here?
Great story. So, yeah, so my fascination with horses never left me from that time, and as we mentioned, just keeping the horses in my life through stories and my imagination and drawing, because we didn't have horses. My family didn't have horses when I was growing up. Nobody in my immediate family ever had any particular interest in horses, so that wasn't a part of our household except for what I brought into it. And eventually, I remember talking my parents into exploring that I could get some horseback riding lessons when I was I'm going to say when I was about 12. And we didn't quite have the money for that, but we went to see a barn, and my parents got me some riding lessons I don't remember if it was my birthday or for Christmas, but they got me some riding lessons. And of course, when those had run out, that was not an acceptable occurrence to me that I was done riding. So I wanted to figure out a way to keep going. And we came up with an arrangement that whatever money I made as a teenager, my parents would match.
Oh, wow.
And then I could put that money towards whatever I wanted, which of course was riding lessons and being at the barn. So I ended up going out and finding every odd job I could find, mostly babysitting jobs and things like that. But my parents matched the money, and I stayed at the barn, and I continued to ride. And I spent as much time there helping as I could. So I became very useful around the barn as far as helping with chores and feeding, and getting horses ready for lessons, and all kinds of things. Any barn chore you can imagine a little teenager doing around the barn, I was willing to do. And just kept growing from there. So went into some competitions and kept riding all the way through school. And my family moved a few times, so I found new places to go be with the horses and ride and compete. And eventually went to college and got a degree in equine science. So stayed with it all through all of my schooling. And after school, got a job as a really traditional job as far as training horses and giving riding instruction. And that was my career for decades before it sort of morphed into what it is now.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it? It's interesting. I had the same career, and so many people were like, "Well, that's just a hobby,"
Right.
and didn't necessarily see it as what it was, and what it, especially teaching. And I found with teaching youngsters, you were teaching life lessons.
Absolutely.
You weren't just
Yeah.
teaching the mechanics of it. You were teaching life lessons and courage and bravery and heart, and it was more than a hobby.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of those realizations that you're talking about were how I transitioned into more of equine assisted learning instead of, the traditional training and teaching.
Yeah. So how did that happen? How did that flow from one to the other?
So the longer I spent around my clients and the horses, the more I realized that, they would come in and just sort of chit chat about what had been going on for them since I last saw them. And I started putting these pieces together that the time they were spending in the barn was really having an influence on their life outside of the barn. And I just thought the more I listened, the more I heard, and the more interested I got in how this was affecting basically their whole lives, their relationships, their alone time, their work, their play. And I realized that there were some people coming to the barn for different reasons other than learning to ride. To me, anyway, that was my perception, was they didn't really seem to have many goals as far as progressing in their riding. They didn't have dreams of competing. They literally just wanted to come and spend some time with the horses, and whatever happened while they were at the barn happened, and they really didn't even have much expectation beyond just enjoying their time with the horse. And I think in a lot of ways, those were the people that were taking the most home with them as far as their horse experience affecting other parts of their lives. And at first, when I was younger and I had this job teaching people how to ride, it sort of seemed to clash with my agenda for them, which was learning how to ride. And when they showed up at the barn and they didn't really have a lot of drive to necessarily improve what in my eyes would have been improvement, it was a little frustrating to me. But then, again, like I said, the more I listened, the more I heard, the more I realized that what they were getting out of it was different than what I maybe thought they should be getting out of it. But it wasn't any less valuable, and a lot of times it was more valuable. And the value is also dictated by the person has the experience. So, I kind of came to the conclusion that who was I to tell them what they should be getting out of their horse time?
Yeah. Was it sounds like it was a slow evolution from having this agenda for what you thought that they should be learning to, or was there a moment they just went, oh, yeah.
I think there was some of each, because I've thought about that a lot too. Like, I've had a lot of people ask me, like, what was the moment where everything changed? And I can sort of pinpoint a moment or two where things really shifted for myself and the trajectory of my own career with horses and my own experience with horses. But I also can see that there was a really slow evolution to it, because, like so many people decades ago and even still now, I couldn't even conceptualize of some other way to be with horses other than the really traditional ways of riding and training and competing. So for me to see this other, I guess, this other effect being had on my clients with the horses, beyond just seeing that, I really didn't play it out as, well, this could be a whole field of work in itself or field of experience in itself. I just sort of filed it away as like, well, this is a nice benefit of the work that I do with horses and the experiences that I set up for people as far as horseback riding and trail riding and competing. So yeah, I think had I known then that there was an entire field of equine assisted learning, my evolution might have been a little bit quicker, although maybe not. But I just think it was just that time where I sort of almost came to that realization by myself that this could be an entire field, even though it did exist, but there wasn't a lot of access to it. None of us were on the internet as much, so we weren't seeing that sort of thing. All the information wasn't quite as accessible. So I really had to have a lot of experiences with sort of witnessing and hearing what people were taking away from their barn time and applying into other areas of their life, I needed to repeat that and repeat that and repeat that and just sort of gather over the years this huge body of evidence that this was helping them. And at some point, that huge body of evidence became weighty enough that I was like, okay, like this can't be just me, this can't be just them. And I started seeking out more information around what that was. And then I came across the field of equine assisted learning, and, you know, clearly it was already its own thing, but it was even much smaller then than it is now. So I think that was part of what played into that slower evolution of it, was just that information was not even within my awareness at that point as something other than what I was experiencing randomly with certain clients in the barn every week.
And there's a beauty in that, I think, first of all, I'm assuming there was an evolution of self at the same time. Like,
yeah, of course.
letting go of the agenda, letting go of what you thought should happen, and that going into that. But I think there's a beauty in finding it and building that body of evidence on our own.
I totally agree.
Yeah, having the others support, but there is a beauty in going, no, this is what I, coming from self.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's, especially for someone like me, I'm quite intuitive and empathic, so I can be influenced by outside things quite a bit. And I think it was really great that I had all that experience, just sort of in my own bubble for a while, because I wasn't having anybody from the outside, or any person, any article, any video telling me, this is what it's called, this is what you can label it, these are the outcomes that you can expect. I didn't have any of that sort of told me how to think or how to define any of it. So it just came to me, or so organically, and I'm so thankful for that, because you're just not going to deny your own experience when you're seeing those things day after day after day after day, and you don't need somebody else to tell you that they're true or that they're valuable. And like you said, I'm not discounting the supportive nature of that information once you come across it and are searching for it. But yeah, I'm really glad that developed organically for myself without a lot of outside influence at first.
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite special. And did you find it developed within the lessons you were giving too? I say that because I was giving, I give lessons for years and taught lessons, and I found when I went to certify, I was already doing what we were certifying in. And I was doing it while teaching lessons, and the lessons didn't become about, like I said before, the mechanics of it. They became about the trust, and they became about the relaxation, and they became about the self. So did you find there was an overlap as you were seeing this? There was an overlap into your teaching as well?
Sure. And I think that was, I also developed this skill of allowing my time with my clients to be very client led, because it was fairly easy for me to discern which of my clients were open to taking their horse experience beyond their horse experience, and which ones weren't so open to that, or what each of their own agendas or goals or wishes were for their own time with the horses. So I got to practice becoming very attuned to that, and I think when the opportunity presented itself, I was able to go with it. And when it wasn't presenting itself, I just kind of let the client lead the way as far as what they wanted their time with the horses to be or to mean to them.
Yeah, nice. So now, where you are now, I'd love to give you some space to share what that space is like. I'm really being cognizant for myself here in these Inspire Me Equine conversations of my wording, like my words, like work, like your work with horses. And I try to put that as, what happens when you share, someone comes to you and shares the space with you and the horses. But what What do you do now? Do you have specialties? What can someone expect when they come there?
Oh, so my time with the horses now, it doesn't feel much like work anymore. So I'm thankful for the shift in the wording. Um, it's really a 180 from where I was before. And I expect, as with any sort of pendulum swing, I might eventually land back the other direction or somewhere in the middle. But right now, I think I'm about as far to the other end of things as I was a couple decades ago as I could be. And it's so much more about being in the moment, being present, showing up for what is. And it's very, very little about the goal or the outcome or an agenda. And every once in a while, I come to a place where the agenda and or a goal and the being kind of mesh very nicely, but that's few and far between right now. So one of the things that I really love about the way that I am with horses now, which is what I share with my clients, is that every single session, every single experience almost feels like Christmas morning to me. Like it's just such a surprise, and I never know what's going to happen. I've really expanded my awareness to include not just the horses, but nature as a whole. So any of the wild animals, any of the weather changes, the seasonal plants, and the transition of the trees, like all of that is just so weaved into every session. The wisdom of the four directions, it's just all there. And the more awareness I bring to it, the more I find to pull into the session. Even to the extent that sometimes I have a hard time deciding what to even bring to the client's attention, if anything, because there's so much, I see so much happening that's relevant in every session. But it's so fun to show up with a completely blank slate. It's so fun to show up with, I don't have any kind of exercise or activity prepared. Certainly if someone asks for it, I can, provide one and improvise in the moment. But it's like the emptier I show up, the richer the session is. And that is so opposite from the way that I used to do things. I mean, I was almost to the point earlier on in my career where I almost had occasionally had lesson plans for my lessons. Like I just had everything so mapped out what we were going to work on from week to week, and everything is so opposite now. And it makes it so exciting, like the mystery, leaving room for the mystery and the unknown, and trusting that we can all dance with that, because that's actually the practice of life, is that we really don't know what's going to happen from moment to moment, no matter how much we try to plan. And to be able to have that, to allow that experience with some grace and some humor and some playfulness, of just to show up in the space with the horses and Mother Nature and the weather, and just say, okay, for the next however many minutes, we're just going with it.
Absolutely,
and it's so good.
But I love that piece you say about the unknown, because there's so much, really, there's fear of the unknown, and now you're dancing with it.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're going, no, it's here, and I don't know what it is. Let's dance together, and let's see what the horses have to, and nature has to say, and embracing I would imagine that helps people go back to their daily lives and embrace the unknown.
Yeah, I think in some cases it does. For some people, quicker than others. It is like a practice, and I think being present is a bit of a muscle that we engage and we have to develop, because we've been trained otherwise so much of our lives. Mm-hmm. But to have that opportunity with the horses, when there's not really a lot of pressure and there's not a lot of expectation, and the consequences are, I won't say minimal, but the consequences with the horses are different than the consequences in real life. So I think there's a lot of pressure taken off, especially if, usually a client is coming to a session and it's not uncommon that they're feeling a little bit, a little nervous or a little vulnerable. Mm-hmm. But, if I can model that I'm grounded in that moment of unknown, I think that could be supportive to them.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's interesting you say expectation and pressure because that's not the first time those words have come up in our conversations. So
Yeah.
I'm starting to see these similarities and things that people are able to work on, and the expectations and the pressures of that.
Hmm.
So interesting that comes up again and
Yeah.
again. So
Well, we can live in such a pressure filled world right now.
yeah.
There's so many different kinds of pressure from so many different directions. And, you know, we can see ourselves as being pressured. We can see ourselves as applying the pressure. We can see ourselves as immune to, we can see ourselves in all kinds of ways relative to that pressure. But I think being able to practice showing up with the horses without the pressure of something that you have to do or someone that you have to be,
Mhm.
it can be a little scary. But also when you just practice going through from moment to moment, then you realize that you're on the other side of it. And a lot of times in hindsight, you're like, wow, I was really scared, but I let it happen and I went with it. And whatever I thought was the worst case scenario is not what happened, you
Exactly.
know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think there's so much correlation to the world we live in now that if we don't let those pressures cause us to become reactive, we just stay with it from moment to moment, and when we get on the other side we realize, oh, that didn't blow up, or it didn't explode, or if it did, I watched it happen, I'm still here,
Yeah.
and now we have whatever we have, and what do we want to do with it? And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. There's been a few things this year that made me sort of think the words I can't handle this, but then you come out
Hmm.
the other side and you go, oh, wait a minute. I just handled it. And so it's
Yeah.
like that idea that, oh no, I can't. Oh, wait a minute. I did. I did.
Yeah.
And can you speak to as we're talking about pressure and things, but then I look to the model that the horses have, or I call it their paradigm of living, that really has very little pressure.
Yeah, I mean, they're so good at navigating um, pressure and release, for watching their body language and watching their communication. They start responding to just small amounts of pressure in a way that sort of, I would say, normally they're harmonizing the situation and equalizing the pressure, and not fighting that there is pressure or isn't pressure. They're just, like we said, they're sort of dancing from moment to moment. And it's so interesting to watch them, especially when you develop your eye and you become attuned to their very subtle communications, because they tend to pick up pressure when it's just at its very infancy or in a very small state.
Mm.
And they'll continue to monitor and to respond to increasing pressure, but they pick it up when it's so subtle. And I also think that that's a really fun lesson for us humans, because when we're not aware and we're not present, sometimes the pressure needs to build up to a certain a volume for us to recognize it and then respond to it. But I also don't think for us that it has to be that way. I think that we're trained to ignore the pressure, just to do it anyway, to put up with it. There's all kinds of things about being brave or being a better person because you can withstand so much pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not always the lesson that we get, or the modeling that we get from the horses. They're so attuned to even just a little fly landing on their skin and how they respond to it. And I think for humans, if we could let ourselves be sort of soft enough to feel the smallest pressures and respond to them when they're small, we may head off some of the bigger pressures in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's also interesting, the dance between doing that on an individual level versus a collective level. There's a lot of dynamics there to
Yeah.
explore, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. The horse and the herd. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you do private sessions and then you do some group sessions or
Yeah.
workshops? Yeah. What
Yeah.
do you
Yeah.
specialize at all?
Um, Not really. I'm so open. If somebody comes to me with an idea, I'm totally happy to to discuss it and see what we can come up with that works for everybody. I would say most of my work is one-on-one. I do some small groups, some corporate, I've had some groups of caregivers out, and I also do classes like, it's varied. We'll do some yoga with the horses. We'll do meditations. One of my favorites lately has been, we'll do a shamanic journey with the horses.
Nice.
That's been a lot of fun, and so many interesting experiences have come from that. And we'll also do like a plant walk around the farm with an herbalist. So yeah, I do a lot of fun group things that sort of center around, wellness and mindfulness. And I would say those are at the core of it. And it just comes through in different ways, whether it's a meditation or Reiki or a sound bath.
Nice. Nature is its own sound bath, eh?
Oh, that's very true. Very, very true. And, I think through all of those experiences, people may come because they're familiar with meditation and they think, oh, well, that's different to be outside and with the horses. And almost invariably while they're here, they will have some like one-on-one interaction with one of the horses in my herd that really opens their eyes to what's available through like a private one-on-one session. They might get a little glimpse of it within a group experience, like a meditation. And then once they have that little experience, because that's what it really is the experience. You can only tell somebody about this work so much, and no matter how well spoken or how well written you are, the experience doesn't sit with them the same way until they actually have it themselves with their own sensory awareness. So, when they come for a group experience like that, they usually leave with at least a hint, if not something way more obvious than a hint of what could be possible if they came for a session on their own.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. So if a client, would you have a client story to share? Obviously not using names, but
yeah. Again, about 1 million stories went through my mind. And I can't hardly pick which one to share because they're so varied and so amazing. But again, this was the one that was most present in my mind this morning. It was, I had a client show up for a private session, and they had been here several times. And when I checked in with this person first thing in the morning, they said what they were showing up to the session with was this resistance to and this frustration with some of the extremely positive people that they had been spending time with, and that their positivity seemed unrealistic to this person. And that was annoying and frustrating because they thought that the other people around them weren't being realistic about the nature of life, that there was good and bad, and all they were concentrating on was the positive and the good. And so this was irritating to this person. And she kept using this term that these people, and I might have it a little bit wrong, but something to the effect of these people were the rainbows and butterflies people. And that was all they saw was rainbows and butterflies, and they didn't see the bad things actually happened, and the real state of the world and the circumstances that everybody was in. And so as she's talking, of course, in the sky there comes this huge rainbow right over the farm, and it was in the eastern sky. And so she had her back to the direction of the rainbow, and I was facing her and the rainbow, and I'm just looking at this rainbow emerge out of the sky as she's talking about her rainbows and butterflies people in her life that she's so irritated with. And one of the horses, the one that she was feeling quite connected to that session, actually moved himself in such a way that to spend time with him, she had to face the east where the rainbow was. And it caught her eye, so she turned to spend some time with this horse, and the sky caught her eye, and the look on her face, I don't even know if I can describe it, but I would say it was something like, she had some eye rolls, and she didn't even find it funny that this huge rainbow had appeared and that the horse had sort of positioned her to face it. If she really wanted to connect with him and spend time with him, she almost couldn't help but see this rainbow. And I don't know, that whole thing just was so amazing to me, that that horse. I have so many, as with so many things, I have so many questions. Did the horse see the rainbow? I don't know. Was it a coincidence that he, positioned himself in such a way that she was inclined to turn around and see what was in the sky, and that he was just so still and present for her, and the connection they had, and what the horse was providing to the client throughout a few different sessions, not just that session, but was so supportive to her in actually facing what that rainbow represented to her.
Mm-hmm.
And just the whole thing was just so profound. Just a really cool example of the weaving together of the Mother Nature, the weather, the horse, the client, and I was just kind of witnessing all of it with such amazement. And at one point, I remember the client saying, that rainbow's going to stay there till I leave this property. And
Yeah.
I said, well, I guess we'll see. And sure enough, it faded literally as her car was pulling out of the driveway. So, and I took a picture of the sky right after she left, and I sent it to her. I said, you were right. You pulled away and the rainbow faded. And it was just such an experience.
You for people say it, you can't make this blank up. You just,
No.
there's no way in life that you can. And that's a lot of what we do with the horses. There's a lot of science behind it, but there's so much magic behind it.
Yes.
And something like that's unexplainable.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I, like I said, I have a million stories like that. Are you okay if I share another?
Absolutely. Yep. Good time. Yeah.
There was another client that came, and in the course of the session, this was a little bit more recently than the rainbow story, but in the course of the session, the question, that famous question of, if a tree falls in the forest, does it, and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound?
Yeah.
For some reason, and I can't even remember why, but that question came up because it was relevant to something else that was going on in the client's life. And as he was talking about it, within 5 seconds, he'd barely gotten that sentence out of his mouth, that question out of his mouth, and there was a huge crash in the woods behind the barn.
No.
And I'm like, I'm pretty neutral during sessions. I can employ a pretty good poker face if I feel like I should, and I just couldn't even keep the surprise off my face in that moment, because we didn't have bad weather. There was no wind. There was nothing that you would have said, today we have to watch out for falling trees. There was nothing that implied that at all. And as soon as he talks about the tree falling in the forest, a tree fell in the forest right next to the barn. And, I said, did you hear that? And he said, yeah. And I said, I think a tree fell in the forest. And so, we actually left the paddock. We checked in with the horses because, they had a response to the noise, and I checked in with him. And then we actually went out to the forest and spent some time with the tree that had come down, and then came back in with the horses again. And it was just, like you said, you can't make this stuff up, and you can only brush it off as coincidence so many times. And then you almost have to start putting some weight to it.
Exactly. And just let it be what it is.
Yeah.
Wow. And so many of us have so many of those stories.
Yes. So many.
Do you come to expect it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't yet. I think that I've come to be excited about it when it happens. I don't expect it. But I also know that anytime you're looking for something amazing, you can find it. So I almost just trust that if you want something amazing and you just stay in the moment, that you're going to experience it. But no, I don't expect it, but at the same time, I know that it's always there. So like, there's nothing, you almost don't need to expect something if you trust that it's always there. So
Okay.
that's a little bit of, I don't know, like, I don't know what the word is, but it's, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's yeah. Wow, yeah. And it's as soon as we start to expect things, that's when they don't happen.
Yeah. And I think part of that is because when you expect something or you have such a longing for it, really in part of your energetic makeup is the lack of it. And then sometimes I think that's what shows up more as the lack, because wanting something or expecting something is dependent on the fact that you don't have it currently. And so the lack of it in your awareness is sometimes stays your reality until you perceive differently, if that makes
100%.
sense.
Oh, no, that's and that leads me on to the a very common thing is touch and touching horses and seeing that as the only way that a horse can offer love. And seeing many people go to the horses and the horse doesn't come over and offer a shoulder or a neck or a nose to touch, and it's like, oh, they don't love me. And there's that
Yeah.
expectation, and the moment that the light sort of their heart lightens up and goes, but love can come in so many ways. And
Yes. Yeah. That's great, because I do see that a lot, especially when people are just spending their first session or two with the horses, and they do sort of come in with the expectation that the horse might be like their dog at home or their cat at home, that it wants to cuddle and be physically touching. And it's not uncommon also that the client jumps to a very black and white view of that, like the horse likes me or the horse doesn't like me. And it's then at that point, then the opportunity presents itself to sort of explore the gray area in there between, what is in between like and not like, and how do you know that it's like and not something else, or it's a dislike and not something else, because those are the labels that we give that behavior to a species that doesn't speak the same language or have the same social norms or relationship norms that we have. So it opens up a huge door to see things in a different way, and to also just look at the horses and say, well, how often do you see them touching each other? It certainly is not as often as we see like ourselves touching our dog or petting our cat. So yeah, that's a really common dynamic that plays out usually fairly early on in my work with my clients.
absolutely, yeah. Because I think once it's dropped, once it's sort of let go, then the door opens to, like you say, explore all these other along that continuum, like to explore all these other ways of um, communicating and feeling that love.
Yeah, yeah. And as you probably know, as soon as the client is able to access some of that or resource some of that within themselves or from a different source, and sort of drop the expectation or the need for the horse to fulfill that role or to display that behavior, normally that's when something shifts and it actually happens anyway.
Exactly. So, what do you think it is? I mean, I've had clients stand outside of a field, never having touched the herd or a horse in the herd, and fall apart saying, I hope they love me. I just want them to love me. What is it in the horses? What is that? What essence is that?
What is it in the horses that makes the client want to be loved by them?
Yeah, this emotion, this buildup of this deep emotion, but it's the horses. They could stand in, like I say, they could look at their dog, but they could stand in front of this field of horses, and the horses don't even look their way, and they're just, oh, there's
Yeah,
something in there. And yeah, what is that essence?
I To me, I mean, I know what it is for me because I still experience that when I go up and look at a field of horses, whether it's the ones that live here at my own farm or horses that I've never met before. I still will walk up to the gate or the fence and say, I hope they come over to see me so I can touch them. Like that part is still inside of me, even though I navigate it in a different way now and I have a different understanding of it. But, I think I can only speak to my personal viewpoint. It's just I don't know, the horses, they're so beautiful. They're such a strong presence. They're so graceful. They're so strong. I think to me, they embody so many qualities that I would like to recognize in myself. And so I think that's such a draw to, partner with them, and maybe like just thinking like the closer they come or the more they engage with me or the more they let me be with them, the more accepting they are of me. Maybe that means that I have some of those qualities in myself. So I think that's a part of it, is just what the horses inspire in us or what we feel looking at them, like the qualities that we assign to them. And I also think that, other animals like dogs and cats are a lot more common for the general population than horses. So I think there's the aspect of just the novelty of being able to possibly engage with such a large animal. So I think also because of their size and their strength, they prompt us to be more present.
Yeah. True.
And I think that all factors into what you're speaking about.
Nice. I love that. Somebody, I had a client once that said the horse reminded them of a bartender. I thought that was a perfect analogy of just somebody that listens and is there and present for you. And yeah, I was like, I never thought of it that way. But I also,
Yeah.
I think there's just because we have been connected to horses for millennia. It's for so many years. I imagine there's something in there, something that we can't even explain in our DNA that's carried through generations, that there's this connection that is without words.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I don't know that there's another species that has been so intertwined with humans in the same way as horses. Just the different aspects of our lives that they've been able to touch and to facilitate and to shape. I really can't think of another species that has fulfilled all the different roles that a horse has, to the extent that horses have.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, I wouldn't doubt if there's some genetic connection somehow, however that is, that our DNA connects to theirs or communicates to theirs. I don't doubt that there is something very strong and shared there because of our shared journey. To me, it's almost undeniable.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one more question before we start to close this circle out, is time. You mentioned time at the beginning. Your piece in our 10th anniversary edition was all about time and your horse. Can you speak to time and horses?
Yeah. So when I first started doing private sessions, I actually I would arrange a start time with the client, but I didn't ever have a cap on the session length. I left it open because that felt very true to my work. And I've since changed that for different reasons. Doesn't really matter, but it always was interesting to me that some sessions, I wouldn't ever really have a sense of how much time had passed during a session when I didn't have to set a timer for the end of the session or keep an eye on the clock for the end of the session. And I almost got to where I would play a little game with myself and try to guess how much time had passed in the session before I looked at my clock. And boy, I just never got it right. It was like, it seemed like 10 minutes and it had been 2 hours, or it seemed like 4 hours and it had been 25 minutes. And I always thought those moments of realization were so fun because it was just without the measuring device of a clock or a watch, my sense of the passage of time was so not any less valid, but so different from what the clock said.
Yeah.
And it's just been so interesting to reflect on the nature of time, not only because of what I wrote about in the article, but just because of other experiences that I've had. And there have been times when I even asked the client, "Hey, do you want to guess how long it's been that we've been out here with the horses?" just to see what they would say. And often their guess was wildly different from mine, and both of ours was wildly different from how much time had actually passed. But we were able to sort of measure the start and finish of the session by what was occurring and how we were feeling, and if we felt finished or done or complete, not because the clock told us we were done. And that was such a really interesting way when everybody had the opportunity, when everybody had no cap on an end time, nothing else scheduled that they had to show up to at a certain time, and we could just leave it open. It was really, really cool to see how the sessions wrapped themselves up outside of a certain amount of minutes or a certain amount of hours.
Yeah.
And there's a way to measure that the ending of something by what's happening, not because a certain amount of minutes has passed. And I love that I had that experience early on, that I structured my sessions that way, because that did help me experience time differently. And I could go off on a few tangents here about time, but I mentioned the shamanic journeys with the horses, and it's really common doing those. That I've had many clients say that they feel like they've time traveled in those sessions, and to me, I say, you did. Like, who's going to say you didn't? For you to go back or to go forward and to experience your future self or your past self, and to talk yourself or walk yourself or support yourself through a future or a past experience. It's so valid to me, and it's so proven by my clients' experiences and by my own experiences, that I don't even need somebody to tell me time travel is not possible or something like that. And I said, well, we do it often, so I don't know what you're talking about.
I love that concept of when we take the expectation of the clock away from a session, and let the session feel complete on its own.
Mm-hmm.
Without, I'm paraphrasing you here, but that idea, that's powerful.
It is. And by doing that, you really get to check in with yourself and say, do I feel done? What is done to me? Like, what do I need to feel complete here? Mm-hmm. What am I okay leaving incomplete? Like, if I feel done with this interaction, do I feel done because all of my questions have been answered, or do I feel done because of my energy level, or do I, there's all kinds of ways you can define something being complete or finished or done. And even just going through the experience of how does each person define something being complete, that's an interesting experience all in itself.
100. Oh my gosh, that's so powerful. Wow. That's going to stick with me for the day. And I pulled up your story here from Equine Leadership, and that your bit on time drips, freezes, stretches, and stops. But there's even more to it than that.
Mm-hmm. And we probably don't even know what else there is to it. Well, we don't. We don't know all of it. So even the things that I talked about in the article, I'm totally open to the idea that there's even more to that I might get a hint of at some point in my life.
Exactly. And how do horses see time? They don't. It's just they're present, 100% present. So
yeah.
Wow, so much to think on here. So I have one final question.
Yeah.
And that is what is in your heart that wishes to be shared as we close the gate on this.
Okay, so what's been on my heart lately is something that I have been thinking about a lot ever since I wrote that article, and it's about well, this is sort of a little bit vague, so we'll see where my thoughts take me right now, because it's a lot about redemption and forgiveness and the passage of time. Because I can look back at some of my earlier experiences in my career, and with with the information and the viewpoints that I have now, I can find myself falling into the habit of being hard on myself about some of the ways that I used to interact with horses that I wouldn't do today. Mm-hmm. And so that idea of like, what do I need to, let myself off the hook or to not feel bad or guilty? It's been something I've been thinking about a lot lately, but, I keep coming back to that everything is an evolution, and mm-hmm. what we do in one moment, I really do trust that it's the vast majority of people are doing the best they can in any given moment with what they have. Mm-hmm. And to be able to sort of see yourself in that framework at any point in your life or your career or whatever it is so valuable, because as you evolve, of course, you're going to do things differently. And it's just being able to look back and apply that and say, I didn't know then exactly what I know now. So if I can see myself as having done the best that I knew how to do in the moment, even though I wouldn't do it now, it's just the idea of, what I'm a little bit all over the place here because this is still a little bit abstract in my mind, but just being able to look back and say, like, at some point you realize that there really wasn't anything to forgive yourself for because you were doing the best you could in the moment. Mm. So I think that's how we get to that feeling of being redeemed. If we have that, as I do, a little bit of sometimes falling into that guilty feeling of how I used to do things. And it's just that, that whole theme of what does it take to feel redeemed, or what is redemption? And lately I've kind of come to that point where, like, if you can realize that there's nothing to forgive, then you sort of arrive at that place of redemption. And horses can be such a help with that, because they're not ruminating in the past, which is, I think, sort of where we get stuck when we're thinking about something that we would like to be forgiven for or that we feel guilty over, and horses just aren't there. So it's been interesting for me to explore that theme and that feeling lately, of being with the horses in the present moment, and bringing in also that in a way that is redemption, the present moment.
To be there and stay there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I'm just going to say, wow. Yeah, that's, there's a lot in there. We could do a whole other hour on that one.
We can. I'm open to that if you'd like sometime.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm so happy we got together and had this chance to, or give you this chance to share you and your horses and the magic of it all with us. And I thank you all for joining us in Circle at whatever moment in time that you are listening to this. I hope you are inspired by Stephanie and the horse and the magic and the rainbow and the trees falling and all of that. I'm going to put a link to Stephanie's article in our summary, and some things that we've maybe spoken of here today. There are many ways that you can stay tuned and inspired, of course. So I'll put the social media in there too. And please consider sharing this episode, or as we like to say, share it forward. You really just never know who needs to hear the word shared in this circle. Sharing one story might be the very thing another human needs to hear, to open their heart to maybe a brighter tomorrow for them. So please consider sharing this forward. And thank you for being with us today. Thank you, Stephanie, for being with us. And from our heart to yours, stay well, stay connected, and stay inspired.